So this is not just related to giving da'wah. I think we live in, like in a country, in a culture where you will find through this session, these things, atheism and evolution, is actually being taught from very, very early stage, as early as school years. You will find when we go through this that this is actually indoctrination of young people to start believing in evolution, and start basically evolution is the only possible way that you could come to the conclusion of basically, let's say, natural selection or the disproof of God's existence. This is the only way you could come to such a conclusion, and they just teach it to people from a very young age. So what we're going to go through, inshallah, this session, we will talk about some definitions to understand, because I promise that the session will not be very, I would say, convoluted or complicated in terms of the expressions that we use. We try to simplify it. So we will go through some definitions, and then we'll talk about the intelligent design argument of God's existence, and we discuss that in length. And then we will speak about evolution and natural selection. And then we will circle back, and we will talk about basically what is then the purpose of life and what is the objective truth. All right. The way how I constructed this presentation or this session is that sometimes some people come to us in the Dawa'a table, and they basically come with like two different positions. Either they say, well, there might be some objective truths, but nobody can have access to that truth. Okay, nobody can claim that they know what's actually the truth. So nobody can say for sure that Islam is true, or they just like to believe that everything is subjective, everything is just your point of view, and you don't have any mean to prove that your point of view is valid. Okay, so this is one position. The other position is this very famous position that people say, you know what, you could be true, I could be true as well. Even if you say this thing is a square and I say it's a circle, we still can combine both things, and we leave believing that both are true. You're basically saying you can have a squared circle, which is in itself a contradiction. Like the definition of God in Christianity, for instance, or in Hinduism, contradicts the definition of God in Islam. So you can't have all truth all together at the same time. And we will prove that, inshallah, in a kind of like a systematic and academic way. So let's start with what is objective, what is subjective. Okay, so when we say objective reality or objective truth, we basically referring to a object or event that exists independently of your individual belief. Okay, and when we talk about a subjective reality, is basically something that refers to your personal experience and your interpretation and perceptions. Okay, and that is always influenced by your emotions, your beliefs, your biases, stuff like that. So I'll give an example. An objective reality, for instance, you have a thermometer. That thermometer reads temperature of 30 degrees. Okay, anybody who can come and look at this thermometer, they would agree that the temperature is 30 degrees. All right, so this is objective reality. Like nobody can falsify or contradict to that. This is objective reality. What is subjective is that when you say, well, in that 30 degrees, I feel hot. Someone else feels, a bit warm, but not hot. Someone actually think it is chilly, So this is all personal, subjective experiences. Okay, so that differs, and there is no problem with that. But that doesn't change the fact that the thermometer reading was 30 degrees. So that's just to cover the definitions, because we're going to use these words very often in this presentation. The other terminology that we want to be familiar with, is the artificial selection versus natural selection. All right. So what is artificial selection? When we use artificial selection in this context, we are talking about God being the ultimate designer behind all sorts of creation, whether it is biological beings like humans, animals, plants, etc., or it's physical beings like the cosmos, like the universe, the stars, the sun, the moon, and all these things. So when you say artificial selection, means God has selected certain entities, certain species, certain physical quantities to exist and to operate in a certain way. On the other hand, when we say natural selection, and then we will cover how this term actually came about, it is basically a mechanism of evolution. So they will say, that's the definition of natural selection, organisms that are more adapted to their environment are more likely to survive and pass on these genes, okay, that aided their success, okay? And this process, which is basically, we're saying this is survival for the stronger or the strongest, okay? They say this is what caused the species to change and diverge over time. All right, and we will discuss this at length, inshallah. But this is very important to understand the difference here. They say everything was there, but those ones who continued to evolve and carried on, those are the ones that are more likely to survive because their genes, okay, are more adapted or more lined up to be adapted in the future. All right. So this is just definitions. Started with these definitions. It's important to know these definitions. Now let's say, all right, there are so many ways to basically prove God's existence. Okay. And this is, unfortunately, it's a matter of question nowadays, even though all you need to do is just to look around you and you realize that this universe must have a God. But for someone that this fact is not as simple, as clear to them as it should be, we should have some sort of like a academic approach and sort of like a systematic approach to try to explain to them this, to break it down to them so that they can see it more clearly. All right. So we say that humans are actually born with that default knowledge of that there is, a creator for this existence. And we call this knowledge, we call it the innate knowledge. It's the fitra, something we were born with, okay? But there is another way to prove God's existence. It is called the intelligent design argument, all right? So intelligent design is actually something that we, sorry, thank you. So intelligent design is something we use very often in our day-to-day life when we talk to people, like when we start saying like the mobile phone or the tablet, it does have a manual, someone has manufactured, that person, this is all cannot come together just by chance or randomness or stuff like that. And that is basically, that's all. But if we want to talk about it more in depth and try to break it down, that's what we're going to do in these coming slides. So we say that the universe shows, certain, let's say, attributes or characteristics, which is uniformity, stability, and regularity. All right. Nobody can disagree on that. And we spoke about this one in the last session, so I'm not going to repeat it again. But as I said, there is this professor called Martin Rees who basically came up with something called the 6 numbers, and he listed those 6 physical constants. You see, though, they are in red here. Those physical constants are finely tuned, okay, finely tuned to basically allow life. If any of those physical constants changes the slightest bit, the universe wouldn't have existed. And I was thought to put this basically example, which is a bit scientific. I'm not going to go in depth, but it's basically talking about something called the coupling force. So any two bodies, any two charges, they have some coupling force that keeps them both at the same orbit. Okay, these atoms, those molecules, they stay together in a structure, in a shaped structure. Okay, because of some coupling force. This coupling force exists in like the Newton gravity and exists also in electrostatic. As you see here, these are the equations and these are the values for those two coupling forces. And those coupling forces, basically, we say, if they were greater, they have a very specific number. You see the number here. It's a very specific calculated number. If that number was different by only 2%, okay, what would have happened is when that Big Bang theory happened, all the hydrogen in that cosmos would have been consumed and there would have been no hydrogen anymore, okay? And that would have happened in 2 minutes. What does that mean? That basically means that we would have no stars, okay, if the hydrogen was consumed in the very first few minutes after the Big Bang theory, we would have no stars. Means there is no light source in the universe. We would have no carbon, no oxygen, no nitrogen, no iron. No galaxies would have been formed. Without hydrogen, there would have been no water, no organic molecules. The universe would remain in a relatively featureless state. Okay, and also the thermal history of the universe would have been altered. So basically, no existence. Okay, so someone argue that these physical constants came about by chance. Okay, they have a lot of work to do to prove how these two particular numbers, okay, that any slight change of these numbers would have caused the universe all to not exist just a few minutes after the Big Bang theory. So when we say that, we say there is now there is evidence that there is a intelligent design. There is a universe that is finely tuned to permit a range for existence, for life to be. We ask them the questions: does this indicate or mean intelligence or absence of intelligence? To be honest, if someone answers this question and say this indicates absence of intelligence, I don't mind just abandon the whole conversation, altogether at that point, because that person is not being actually reasonable. But you know what? We are in this agreed that we need to be charitable to people. We need to continue talking to them and try to explain to them the most or the best we could, so that they don't have any excuse to believe in what they believe. So, what is the objection to the intelligent design? Is the most famous objection. Okay, they say no, there is no intelligence. It basically all happened by evolution, or they call it the natural selection. All right. So what we're going to cover addressing evolution, natural selection, we are going to talk about historical background of how evolution theory happened. And then we're going to talk about problems with the evolution postulation or evolution hypothesis. Okay. So I'm going to cover five different points with problems with evolution, but let's get into the evolution historical background first. So evolution was a theory that was developed by Darwin and Wallace. Okay, that was kind of articulated in the book called Origin of Species, 1859, by Darwin. Darwin died in 1882, and this is an important date I want you to remember, 1882. All right. Who was Darwin? Darwin was actually a nonconformist Unitarian. Okay, so he was Unitarian. Unitarian means he was a Christian believing in one God. He doesn't believe in Trinity. Okay, you'll be surprised when we go through these that all those big scientists, none of them actually believed in Trinity or accepted it as a something that makes sense for them as a belief or as a religion. So he was a Unitarian. So he believed, he was Christian, but he didn't believe in Trinity. And he was very reluctant to give up the idea of God, as the ultimate lawgiver. So, but he was having troubles with the idea or the problem of evil, like where evil comes from, stuff. This we can inshallah cover it maybe in another time. It's a very famous, and as I was saying, 99.9% of people who disbelieve in God, they disbelieve in God because of the problem of evil. They can't comprehend the existence of evil and the existence of God, who is most merciful, most capable, etc. Inshallah, we cover this, but we don't this is not a scope of this session, but inshallah we'll cover it in a separate session. All right. What did Darwin say? Let's just hear what Darwin himself said. He said, I have never been an atheist in the sense of denying the existence of God. This is Darwin, that they use his theory to argue against God. He himself said, I have never been an atheist. I think that generally an agnostic would be the most correct description of my state of mind. So he said, the best I could describe myself is to say agnostic, means I'm not sure. I don't know really. But he said, I can't dare to say I'm atheist. How about Wallace, the one who basically together, they put together this origin of species or the evolution theory. He also was believing in natural world, and the laws in that natural worlds governing it was created by a higher intelligence. He believed that natural selection could not fully explain aspects of human consciousness or morality. So he obviously didn't have or hold an atheistic view. He believed there must be a higher intelligence. So then what happened? Like how, if both Darwin and Wallace both were theistic, both believed in God, in a higher entity, okay, how then evolution theory became the main argument for atheists, okay, that they want to use it against the God's existence? What happened? I'll tell you now. This was all because of this man. This man here is the reason why evolution became a theory that is used to disprove God or to argue against God. All right, I'm going to take you through this guy's background a little bit. He was born in 1887. So he was born after Darwin died. He never met Darwin in his whole life. Okay? So if you think that this guy did even speak to Darwin, he was born 2 years after, 5 years after Darwin died. Okay? Who is he? He was an evolutionary biologist, and he was an advocate of atheism and humanism. All right. I just included here 2 quotes for this guy, and I'm going to read it to you because I want you to know this guy's position, okay, and the malicious intent that he has. He said, the sense of a spiritual relief which comes from rejecting the idea of God as a superhuman being is enormous. So he's basically saying, what makes me be able, to have a spiritual relief, that I can reject the idea of God, that there is a theory out there that I can use to disprove the existence of God. Sorry? This gives me such a spiritual relief, So it's like, now I can speak. Because before evolution, he was an atheist, but he didn't have anything to argue with against God's existence. So this shows you clearly this guy's intentions. I'm going to explain to you why this guy is actually responsible for basically atheism as we know now in the recent time, or in the world that we live in. He also said, in the evolutionary pattern of thoughts, there is no longer either need or room for the supernatural. When you say the supernatural, guys, anything that moves around us in this world, okay, that we can measure by science and by physics, this is natural, okay? This is kind of explained by the laws of physics and the laws of nature. But anything that we can't explain by laws of nature and laws of physics, like God, like the angels, like these things, this is called supernatural, okay? So he says the earth was not created, it evolved. So did all the animals and plants that inhabited, including our human selves, mind and soul, as well as brain and body. So did religion. So he is basically saying everything is a man-made, everything is a man-made construct. Humans has created all of that, including religion. Human made it up. And I'm sure you will hear this a lot. You will hear it a lot. People will come to you and say, isn't religion something that people made up or humans made up so that they can have some sort of, a morality source, because we like to believe that there is a God and stuff. This is people who act like they're smart. Wallahi, they are the farthest from intelligence at all. I'll explain to you now once we get to know who is this guy. This guy, he saw an opportunity to in evolution to spread his atheistic view. All right, but let me take you through his life. I will show you a lot of funny stuff here. So in 1914, Julian Huxley, had a severe depression, and he lived for some time at a nursing home, okay? He was unfaithful to his wife. He told her that he wanted an open marriage, and he had an affair with another woman. And then that other woman had an affair with his wife, all right? So something interesting going on there, okay? And then he described himself, okay, in as suffering from a manic depression. So he was all like, obviously a guy who was having like some, like mental health issues. His wife actually, in her biography, said that he suffered from a bipolar disorder. Okay. So obviously that guy did have his own mental health issues. All right. But this guy now, what he established, now the world lives by the values that he established. Okay. And let's see how. What did he do then? He basically combined 2 theories. He took the natural selection theory from Darwin and Wallace, which was talking about basically studying biology and trying to find links between different kind of species, okay, to say there could be a like a mechanism of evolution there, even though they did not say that mechanism means that there is no designer, because you still can have a designer who designs something, and that something, have a mechanism to evolve. Like, having a mechanism does not negate agency. This is very important, guy, that you need to understand this terminology and be able to use it. Mechanism does not negate agency. Agency means there is an intent. There's something who is willing to make that mechanism. Okay, the car goes from A to B, okay, by someone driving it, but the car doesn't go there automatically. The driver kind of guided to say, yes, I want you to go from here to travel here. So we have to differentiate between mechanism and agency. All right. So he combined this natural selection theory with the genetic science that was kind of like developing during that time, and he created something called the modern synthesis. Okay. All right. What actually what is the modern synthesis? Is basically saying that evolution is driven by genetic changes and are selected for or against by natural selection. So it's basically saying that this evolution, is not guided. Nobody has guided it. It's actually nature itself is what selects which genes to evolve and which genes to die. Okay, very, very, very like unlogical hypothesis, but this is actually, you find a lot of things that you think like, who on earth think this is true? But it's sad. This is actually what most people who are atheist people believe right now, and even the religious people, like the people from the Christian world, they actually believe in evolution. Like, they believe in the creation, they believe in God, but they believe in evolution is correct because they have been taught evolution in the schools. All right. Okay, how did this guy then manage to spread these ideas? Like, if he was just a normal guy and he just had these ideas and he was a scientist or whatever, how did he manage to have such a great influence on the world? The reason, guys, because this guy was the first director general of the UNESCO. Okay, the UNESCO is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. All right. He was the person who is the head, the director of this organization that is responsible for education, science, and culture. So what did he do? This organization, he was the head for this or director of this organization for 2 years, from 46 to 48. That basically when it started. That is like this whole organization all started after World War II. So this is when he was like the first director. Okay, through what? Through global platform, influence, publications, educational programs, cultural dialogue, scientific corporations, networking, collaboration, international, all these mechanisms he basically deployed to start spreading his views. Okay, and that's what we can see that now. Like, the most of the Western world, they already adopted this theory and they teach it at schools as if it is a fact. So we can understand how this guy now had that much influence. I'll give you now 2 scandals related to scientists like this guy trying to force evolution, trying to prove it. This is one of the most famous ones. It's a boy from Congo in Africa. His name is Ota Benga. Okay, this boy had like teeth that like kind of looked, as you see in the picture here. So you know what this evolutionary scientist called Samuel P. Werner did? He went and he took that guy from, he like knew through some of his colleagues, because they were doing this trips to Africa, to study biology and study like the plants and this sort of branches related to science. And they were all believing in evolution and they just wanted to spread it. So what he did, this guy actually captured him, sent it to New York, where they kept him in Bronx Zoo. Okay, and they kept him in a cage with basically with an ape, with a monkey. Okay, and they said, we have found now the link between the monkey and the human. This poor boy, they kept him in a cage with a monkey to prove to the world that the Americans went there, and those scientists were standing and saying, we finally found the evidence that evolution is true, and that the man was originally a monkey and he evolved into a man. And this is the missing link. They called him the missing link. Of course, this poor boy suffered from like severe, distress, and he ended up taking his own life. He committed suicide a few years after. And up until now, this guy you see here, all right, hasn't been actually, let's say, shamed enough in history for what he did. You know why? Because things like that, when it's been known, people know that evolution is the people who basically adopted the evolution theory and wanted to spread it. They had very malicious intents, and they did such a horrible acts to prove, their fragile theory. I'll give you another example. This is now another Nobel Prize winner. Okay, Francis Crick is the person who won the Nobel Prize for finding about the DNA. Okay, the DNA is the when they found it, they called it the secret of life. This is basically finding everything. It's like let's say the code. Okay, the biological code of all living species, all living organisms. Okay, so when they found about the DNA, he had to explain the origin of DNA, right? So he had to explain it. I might be able to go through maybe in another session or something, talk about DNA in length, because it's such a, like, it's one of the very clear examples that you can show to prove to people that there must be an intelligent designer there. But when he had to explain it, what did he say? He said that the origin of life on Earth, okay, he did have these comical hypotheses that life itself, okay, is some form of primordial life, was shipped to Earth billions of years ago in a spaceship. So basically, they're saying that some aliens came in a spaceship billions of years ago, and they planted that, seed of the DNA on Earth. And from that, everything evolved, and we became the humans we are today. And he called that, sorry to say, bullshit. He called it panspermia. Okay, so something you can go and look it up on Google. You'll find it. So again, it's obvious. The historical background tells us how those people who behind the evolution theory were just basically a bunch of liars. Okay, a bunch of like hypocrites. I did put that in the previous session as just a very trivial calculation to say that if we talk about the one protein to have the structure of the one protein coming by chance, okay, just coming together and trying to form a protein, you will need something around 4 times 10 to the power 113 billion years to form one protein. I'm not talking about one cell, I'm not talking about one atom. I'm just talking about one protein, which is like the tiniest bit. You need all that time. We know the universe is only 13.8 billion years old. Okay, so basically it means by going with that idea of chance, you would never have a universe. So now we're saying that this is basically how we can explain like the history, the background of evolution and how it formed, and how the whole theory came about. Okay, what are other objections? Okay, we spoke about that the first cell. That first cell, they did have some hypotheses or some unverified assumptions. Okay, but I'm not going to be able to explain because we only got 4 minutes to go, and I still need to cover the conclusion about all of that in the end. As we said, randomness is an expression of ignorance. There's nothing called random. Okay, if you have all the information about the past and you have the information about the present, you will be able to predict what's going to happen in the future. Okay, in a naturalistic world. All right. So there is basically this, because nobody has that infinite knowledge about all the events that happened in the past and in the present, so nobody can know the future. But there is nothing called randomness. It's just expression of our ignorance, of not knowing. Okay, we call it random. There's nothing called random. Again, we spoke about evolution explains mechanism only, but does not negate agency. There is an agent who is behind the steering wheel, who is directing things to go left or right. And then again, the last thing is evolution speaks about biological species. It does not address at all the physical quantities. All right. So this is very important to keep in mind. So again, we're saying all of that. Can you still say there is absence of intelligence? I think it's very clear. It's absolutely not. It hasn't been an intelligence. So now this is the core. This is the core of the arguments, guy. How can we relate all of that to arguing about basically objective truth and all of that? We basically saying this universe, okay, that was designed, perfectly designed to give the purpose, okay, of the effect of life. So basically the designer who created all this universe had in mind a purpose to give life, okay? And all of these atoms and molecules and existences around the world, they were all compelled, forced to obey the laws of nature or the laws of God, okay? And now God created the humans. Humans are another creation of God, okay? Except the only difference is humans are not compelled, not forced to follow the law of God. We have the free will, which hasn't been given to any other creation, all right? And because of that free will, we have been given the supremacy or the domination over all other species. Okay? In Surah Al-Baqarah, God subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ. He told Adam the names of all things. So by Adam knowing the names of everything, having that intellect, okay, that makes him dominate all other existence, he has been given that ranking to be the center of the universe. So now we're saying, how could the creator who created all things and give it the purpose, okay, of the effect of life so that the human himself, okay, can exist? How can that human himself doesn't have a purpose? How could God design everything and make it so perfect for that human to exist, and then that human doesn't have a purpose? That human must have an objective purpose. And when we establish that fact through understanding, intelligent design, we can then, all right, now there are some competing religions that each one of them claim that they have the definition of the purpose of life, which is the objective purpose of life. It is not subjective. It is not left to each one's interpretation. It is one objective purpose for the human is to follow the law of God. And God has communicated that to us through his messengers, through religion.